Hey guys, Disorder Magic here, and this is one of the most important videos you will ever see about Magic the Gathering. Unless you're way into math and you've already done this yourself, this is going to be very valuable information that you probably haven't seen before. Now, I do apologize in advance, there's no way I have the 4 hours it would take to make the 100 overlays and insert them correctly into this video. No way in hell that's going to happen, so listen really carefully because the numbers absolutely will not be up on screen. You'll see why I'm saying that in about 30 seconds. So what's the worst thing in all of Magic? Net deckers. What's the second worst thing in all of Magic? Getting land screwed or mana screwed or however you want to say it. And a very close third would be mana flooded. And I'd kind of put those together. Just your lands not coming out at the right speed. So you may have found yourself wondering, wow, this seems to happen to me a lot, or oh, this person never gets mana screwed. Like, what's going on here? Well, first of all, their deck is tuned perfectly and the math supports the exact number of lands. If they took out one land or added one land, it wouldn't do as well. So they have it dialed in perfectly. That's why people seem to get mana screwed less. Also, they really know the math of when to mulligan and when not. So they might just be making better building decisions and better mulliganing decisions than you. But other than that, sparing that, I think these numbers are going to surprise you. There is a reason that people say the number one thing wrong with Magic the Gathering is that lands are cards in the deck. So for all these numbers, like a 60 card deck starting with 7 cards in hand. So basically standard non-singleton formats. So with 20 lands out of 60, what is the probability that you will pull exactly 2 lands in your opening hand? Now, some people would say, well, it's 1/3, right? Because 20 divided by 60, 1 in 3. So you would just say, well, there's 7 cards. It's, 1 full card, 1 full card, and then 1/3 of a card. So you would pull 2 and 1/3 of a card. So in other words, in 3 games, you would start with 2, 2, then 3. There is so much wrong with that statement, but I'm going to focus in on just one. It just doesn't quite work that way because whether you pulled one or not influences whether you pull another one or not, and they occur not exactly simultaneously, I guess you would say. It depends how you look at it and how you measure it, but at the end of the day, this just is how it works. Take my word for it. Oh, and by my word, I mean this hypergeometric calculator I'm using on this website. So, your probability of pulling the arguably ideal amount of land, 2 lands, exactly 2 lands, not 1, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, and not 7. Just 2 lands if there's 20 in your deck. 32.3% chance. 2/3 of the time, you will not start with 2 lands in your hand. More than the majority of the time, you will have either 1 or 3 or just a number different than that. In fact, 24.7% of the time, you will start with 1 land. Oh, and it goes without saying, you will start with 1 land means you won't start with 1 land and you will mulligan. Please do. Please. Also, don't put 20 lands in your deck. So try to fend off the asthma attacks, heart attacks, and strokes until the end of the video. But yeah, 1/4 of the time you will get stuck with 1 land. So if you're thinking, oh man, I just can't pull my lands. Another 1 land hand. Another 1 land hand. Oh my god, what the hell's wrong with my deck? No, 25% of the time, 1 in 4 games. I mean, that's almost once per round if you go to the 3rd game. That is how often you will have to deal with 1 land in hand. Now, what is your probability of a number larger than 2? So 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 lands. 42.9%. So that's actually kind of nice because that's higher than 1. So the cumulative probability of pulling any amount that isn't 1. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. So 2 or more lands, 75.29%. But you probably already did that in your head. So 3/4 of the time, you'll have a pretty good opening hand that's moderate that you can start with. I mean, your deck might have to get to 3 in a hurry, but, well, we'll come back to that because that's kind of like a sequential series of events based on a decision, and it's, it's a long story. So let's up it to 21 lands in the deck, which is the most typical amount that people usually use if they don't need to get to 5 in a hurry in the deck. That's usually the basic guideline, although like the curve, the density, the number of 1 costs, and how detrimental it would be, the power of the 3 and under costs, everything should go into how many lands are in your deck. So at 21 lands, you have a 31.3% chance of pulling exactly 2. 2 or more goes up to just a mere 78.2%, but it was like 75 before, so I mean, you're going from a quarter of the time down to about a fifth of the time you'll end up with 1 or 0, by the way. I forgot to mention that whole other sequence, 0 was an option. So greater than 2 goes to about 47% of the time, and less than 2, not including it, is 21% of the time. So you've already shrunk it noticeably, but guess what happens when you go to 22? Okay, you've got exactly 2 jumps to 30%, almost exactly on the dot. Less than 2 drops to 18.9%, so you're really chipping away. I mean, that's almost 1 in 6 if my math is correct. It probably isn't. I'm bad with fractions. Then greater than 2 jumps to 51%, and greater than or equal to 2, so just an acceptable hand, jumps to almost 81% on the dot. So it's gradually going up, but from a relative perspective where you invert it, so 100 minus the probability, and then compare it to the base, you're shrinking the percentage of the time that you would get mana screwed in your opening hand. Like, you're doing it by much higher of a percent than the percent difference on the successes, because you don't care about the percent of the successes, you care what portion of the time is it going to not be a success. So that relative to the earlier numbers is much more significant. I mean, I would even dare say it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2 to 5% relative difference for every 1% that it jumps in successful probability. So 23 is boring. Let's go to the cap that most people put. It's very strange to go above 24 lands in a deck. I've seen people do it in like a land fetch deck or some other gimmicky thing, but if it's just like, oh my god, I need to get to 5 in a hurry in my deck, 24 is where I would cut it off. So 24 out of 60, you got your 7 card opening hand. Your chances of pulling exactly 2 are 26.9%. So, I mean, it's still not terribly likely, but your probability of pulling 2 or more is 85.7%. Now, I know I've been referring to that as the success when a 7 land hand would not exactly be ideal. But for the record, pulling 7 lands with 24 in your deck, which is about the highest you can get, that is a 0.00089% chance. If that happens to you a lot, address your shuffling method. So 24 out of 60, 85% of the time you're going to succeed, or more importantly, well, it's actually 85.7, so about rounded 14% of the time you're going to have 1 or less. Actually, 14.265% of the time. I just realized that it's not 0.0000 before. You got to cut off 2 zeros. I didn't convert it properly. Who cares? It's never going to happen. It's less than 1% chance. It just, drawing 7 lands, I don't think I've ever done it. Okay, somebody's going to ask, 24 lands, you have a 1.2% chance of pulling 6 lands in your opening hand. Anyway, back in reality, the full spread is exactly 2, 26.9, an amount less than 2, 14.2% of the time, and 2 or more, 85.7% of the time. So you have fixed it significantly at that point, but it's still not that far from 20. So 20 is the lowest I would go in anything but a really weird deck, and 24 is the highest I would go in anything but a really weird deck. So the moral of the story is you're going to get land screwed a certain percentage of the time. I mean, almost regardless of the way you build, at least 15% of the time. In fact, even with 24, it's almost exactly 1 in 7 games you're going to start with 0 or 1 lands. And by the way, once again, when I said start, don't. Mulligan. That's don't, comma, mulligan. Like, as in you should mulligan. Don't start with 1. So let's back up. Okay, 21, the magic number that most people use. So 21 lands out of 60. You got a 7 card opening hand. Nothing really changed. Number of acceptable successes would be 2, but let's say you really need to get to 3. So yeah, spun the Wheel of Fortune, and oops, your 31% chance that you'll pull exactly 2 hit, which, I mean, come on, it's practically 1 in 3, so yeah, you'd probably hit it. So you started with exactly 2 lands, but you really need to get to 3. Like, it's an acceptable hand, but 3 of your cards cost 3 and 1 of them cost 2, so you really need to get to 3. Well, let's say you're going first, because not going first, you obviously basically start the game with 8 cards, so if you are going first, you can land drop, then draw a card, then land drop again, and then draw a card, and then at that point you would definitely need another land. So it has to be one of those 2 cards that you drew. So what is the probability that on curve at the time you need it, you will have that 3rd land? Everybody always wonders this, and the numbers are going to surprise you. the probability that you will pull either 1 or 2 lands in those 2 card draws is a mere 59.2%, so right around 60%. This is why having a whole deck full of 3-cost spells will lose you the game in a hurry. I really get scared when my deck doesn't have at least 8 cards in general that are 2 or 1 cost, because I know that if I don't get to 3, I'm in trouble. If you were to want to practically guarantee it, you'd almost have to put in like 28 lands or something just utterly outrageous, and then your chances of getting flooded are just astronomically higher. So these stats say that a little bit more than 1/3 of the time you will not pull that third one on time. So okay, you missed a land drop, you cast your 2 cost, you basically did absolutely nothing for that one turn, you might be able to get away with that, let's go to the next turn. Now this is a sequential probability assuming that you already failed at the first 2, not an adjustment to add a third draw overall. This is assuming you already failed. Now, what is your probability that the next card, which, I mean, you can almost do this in your head, 19 lands left in the deck, 51 cards left in the deck, ta-da, 37.2%. So you already whiffed on the 40% miss margin. Now you've got almost a 70% miss margin. It's like 63%, so not really almost 70, but it's big. You know why? Because about 1 in 3 cards in the deck are lands. That's why it's 37%. It's a little bit higher because you've been artificially increasing the density of them by drawing cards that aren't them. But 19 divided by 51, that's just what it is. Now let's back this up a little bit. You already drew 2 lands. Why the hell does somebody say, well, it's a 1-land hand, but I'm going to keep it? Do you realize how far behind and how unlikely that is to work out? Oh my god, no you don't. You're about to. So 60 card deck, you've already started with 1 land, and now you're about to pull your first card going first. So that turn you need to pull a land because you already played a land without drawing a card. Passed, okay, they drew a card, went their turn, now it's your turn. So immediately you draw a card, what is the probability that it will be a land and you'll have your second land on time? Not exactly hard, not even hypergeometric. It's linear. Not exactly hard, people. 20 divided by 53. Duh. 37.7%. So about 2/3 of the time you will not pull your way out of that in 1 turn. But let's just say, okay, your opponent mulled to 5 and you're very, very sure that that by itself bought you 3 turns, okay? So they started with 1 land, you started with 1 land, which actually that in itself is stupid because you both have the same probability of pulling yourselves out. But it depends how many 2-cost spells are in their hand versus how many like 3-cost spells are in your hand. So that's a consideration, but let's just say you know that they're playing behind, we'll say 2 turns overall. So everything in your hand costs 2, you just need that second one and you're going to run them over. That's all you need, and you think that they're going to stall out for 2 additional turns, plus your initial draw. You still only have a 76.7% chance of pulling your way out of it. I mean, that's not good. It's pretty good, but a quarter of the time it'll backfire and blow up in your face. So don't ever keep 1-land hands. I mean, there's very, very narrow circumstances where you would want to do this. That is definitely the topic for another video though, but in general, just don't do it. It's like the ultimate new player trap. Somebody says, oh, I've got like a 2-cost, 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 2-cost. 2 of them are really hyper powerful creatures and 2 of them are removal, and then the other one's a 3-cost counterspell. This is like the ideal opening hand. I just need a land. That's all I need. It is a trap. I don't care how perfect those other 6 cards are, you are not going to draw that second land, and you're not going to draw the third land. So you can take all this hypergeometric probability and stack probability and conditional statements and everything and just throw it out the window and just think, okay, about 1 in 3 cards in my deck are land. About. So to pull a land, inversely, it should take about 3 turns. Like on average, the probability states that it will take about 3 turns to pull a land if it's 1 in 3 cards in my deck. So that doesn't take into account the shrinking of the deck over time as you don't draw the lands, etc. But it's honestly not that far off. So if you have enough 1-cost spells that you can wait 3 turns to get your second land, great. Just remember that's not a sure thing. You might be waiting 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 turns. So there's one more thing I want to illustrate with the numbers here, and that's how, you know how the pros say the number one mistake that people make is they don't mulligan enough. If you want to be a pro player, learn when to mulligan, and you will mulligan more often. To an extent, that is true. I would say almost as a whole, that's true. There are some exceptions, but I mean, I would supersede that entire statement by just saying learn how math works. I mean, then you'll make the best decision in any given circumstance. Know the quantity of everything in your deck and run the probability in your head real quick. Oh, there's, 8 creatures that'll pull my way out of this, or 8 removal spells left in my deck. It's been this many turns, there's approximately this many cards left in my library, so divide it, what are my odds of pulling it over the next 2 turns, and just don't make it hypergeometric, because a reduction by 1 card isn't really the end of the world. So like 2 shots at a 4 in 40 is like a 50-50 cumulative if you're going to draw 2 cards. That's loosely how you do it in your head, you just kind of round it and get an approximate. Because, a 1 in 4 versus a 3 in 4 chance, that's, pretty damn far away. So once again, 21 lands, 60 cards in the deck, opening hand of 7, you need 2. So the probability that you will pull less than 2, so either 0 or 1 lands, is 21%. So 1 in 5 games you're getting burned, alright? So now you just fell into that. It's a 1 land hand. You already know not to keep it, so let's not keep it. So now you're going to go down to 6 cards, but still be taking a shot at 2. And see, that's where people get messed up mentally, because they think, okay, well, if I mulligan, I'm getting 1 less card chance at it, so now it might go from 1 to 0, or it's just way less likely to be 2. Well, I mean, you're not wrong, because the chance of pulling less than 2 when you're only pulling 6 cards is 30.6%, so just under 1 in 3. Now remember, before it was 21% chance, so you've gone from almost 20% to almost 30%. So yeah, you are upping your probability of getting mana screwed, again, by drawing 6 cards, but that's why they added in the 7th card, Scry. Because remember, on your next draw step, assuming you don't manage to get your deck shuffled between then and now, you're going to pull that card. Now, the math gets really complex with if it's a success, you leave it, but if it's not, you don't. So technically, you get a blind 8th shot at the card. I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole because it's such a nightmare mathematically, and I feel like I'll screw it up. But basically, remember that you're not truly drawing 6. You're drawing 6, and then also you're going to scry. Now, you'll only scry if it's a 1 land and you decide to keep it, and then it would be relevant because you get another shot at if it's a 2, but then it's already determined, so you can't count on that scry blind because it's not included in the initial 7 because it's 6. Hopefully you followed me on that one. So what I'm saying is, it's not actually a 30% chance of failure, but it's also not another 21% shot exactly verbatim because it's, 6 cards plus scry 1 at 7. It's the same as your opening hand. It's not. It's somewhere in between. Where specifically in between? Yeah, I'm not going to do that math. Now, the whole philosophy of you would only mulligan if it's already occurred to be a failure, so it's already determined, so you can't cumulatively, say that they're together, but before it happens, you can. That's like freaking quantum reality level crap. I don't even understand how that works. I think I was sick that day in math class when they covered that. But I'll just give you the Spark Notes version because this video is long enough anyway. If you were to try to force the game to work and for it to be a successful number of lands by keeping 1 versus mulliganing is always better under every single circumstance. I think there's like a break-even point where if you're running like 8 lands or something, but you need to get to 2, but like then you just built your deck wrong. That would be like the point where, oh, you pulled 1 instead of 2. Well, good for you. That's an accomplishment because it's freaking 8 out of 60. Like if you're looking to improve to 2 by going to 6 and mulliganing, no, you would actually stand a higher probability of unimproving your situation. But like I said, the fact that you built your deck wrong in that case massively trumps that. So perhaps a better way to state this that I think will make a lot more sense to the very confused people watching this right now. When you consider the fact that if you pull 1 or less lands, you would automatically mulligan and take a second shot at it with 6 cards plus a scry, it shrinks it significantly below a 21% chance of getting land screwed overall cumulatively. Now, what the final number is, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not 100% confident that my math is correct. I did do the math, I'm just not sure it's correct, so I'm not going to say it. but it's likely floating in at an estimate of around 10 to 14% of the time. So that's the overall cumulative probability that you will mull to 5 because, like, you'll be forced to mull to 5 because you didn't get 2 or more lands in either of your first, like your first draw or your first mulligan. So take that for what you will. I mean, it's like, that might seem like high, like, oh my god, 1 in 10 games, I'm just going to get just mana obliterated and lose. Well, here's what I compare it to. This is why instead of single games of Magic, we play 2 out of 3, because the math and the probability can just kick you in the nuts, and I'm talking more than just lands. Like, you might kill or pull nothing but kill spells and no creatures. That could happen. You could pull, I don't know, nothing but 4 legendary creatures in a row. Like, these are all really, really unlikely, but if you stack them all up, there's a certain percentage of backfire in your deck that could happen. But in a properly built competitive deck, and this is the golden rule, take this away from this video if you take away nothing else. In a properly built deck, it will never exceed 33%. It just won't. So let me explain what that means. If you're trying to win 2 out of the 3 matches, and your deck is going to kick you in the nuts and completely not work at all, 50% of the time, you're not going to win 2 out of 3. If you're going to get completely land screwed and that's the only thing that could possibly go wrong in your deck, it is literally 20 lands and 40 creatures. Like, that's the only thing that could go wrong, and all of your creatures cost 1 or 2. So the only thing that could go wrong in your deck, besides your opponent obviously wiping the board or whatever, but just in your deck, just in a vacuum in your deck, the only thing that could go wrong is the lands. With the first draw and the mulligan, and even inclusive of the mull to 5, because you could still get something going at 5, less than 1 in 10 games you will just get obliterated by the land draws not being good. Like, we're talking automatic game loss, you're never coming back from it level of land draws. So if that happens 1/10 of the time, so 1 in 10 games, but you only have to win 2 out of the 3 games, so 90% of the time it's not going to happen, then that'll translate to you not losing more than 2 out of 3 games. Now, obviously, that's just totally in a vacuum, synthetic, ignoring what your opponent does, ignoring if, you've got creatures, they've got board wipes. Okay, now your odds of winning went down the toilet. But that's just getting more into, like, playing Magic the Gathering, and you cannot even begin to put math into that unless you know your opponent's entire deck list. So just you getting shut down by bad probability and bad draws in a vacuum, completely unrelated to what your opponent does, it will not exceed 33%, and as soon as it hits, like, above that, you're going to start losing your 2 out of 3 matches. And I have seen decks where they're so incorrectly built. I've run the math real quickly, like, okay, he's only got 8 creatures and the rest are control spells, but his only way of dealing damage is creatures. How often would that backfire? Let's even throw in some math about how many removal spells your opponent probably has, which is probably 8. Yeah, you're going to lose more than 33% of the time. Something is going to, quote, go wrong in the game, either lands or you getting all your creatures killed as soon as they come out. That vastly exceeds 33%, and that deck will never win. I mean, okay, not never win, but it will, as a whole, not exactly sweep F&M, because that's enough games to represent a pretty good sample size. You might win, like, 1 or 2 games in it, but you have to win. That's the other thing. It's not just, oh, my deck backfired, but that's cool because I can lose 1. I only have to win 2 out of 3. You could flip that and say, oh, my deck is extremely unlikely to work. It's broken. It's garbage. All the math is wrong. Oh, crap. And now I have to win 2 out of 3. I can't just get lucky and win 1. If I get lucky, whoops. It's just like confirming criticals in 3.5 D&D. If you just barely, can hit the armor class of the opponent and you finally rolled a 20 to critical hit them, but then you have to confirm the crit, you're probably not going to confirm the crit because you have to effectively hit them twice. Well, you have to hit your opponent twice and win 2 games and luck out and get lucky. So if you have a malfunctional deck to the point where it doesn't work more than 33% of the time, you are going to start feeling it in a hurry because it just falls off a cliff. So I cannot stress that enough. Your deck needs to be properly built. You need to have the exact number of lands. Exact. Not +1, not -1. It gets amplified because multiple games, multiple draws within the game, mulliganing, so multiple initial draws, it all multiplies. And then you could go ahead and multiply it by the other chances that your deck will backfire for another reason. Like you just can't draw a removal spell. You just can't draw your combo pieces. You can't draw a creature. So if there's one tiny little, like your deck is off by 4% in its land percentage, so in other words, like basically one land, your overall probability of winning a 2 out of 3 match at FNM probably just went down like 15 to 30%, depending upon how your deck's built. So I am not exaggerating that. I don't feel like drawing it all in equations and stuff. Just at this point, if you're not taking my word for it, why the hell are you even on my channel? I really do know what I'm talking about when it comes to math. Trust me, I used to be a math tutor. But a flaw in your deck's mathematics will get amplified the longer the games go on and the more games you play because of just the whole concept of sample size. So that's why people are like, I don't know how many lands to put in, and this one pro-playing net decking douchebag just told me to always put in 21, so I just always put in 21. That, or my other favorite thing, which I mentioned this in another video, oh my god, do not do this. Well, I played 3 games against my friend, and all 3 games I couldn't draw any lands, so even though I've got 24, I went to 26. Nothing in your deck costs above 3. Why the hell did you do that? Oh, because I couldn't draw any lands, so clearly that was the problem. I don't know what it is. 1, you're shuffling. 2, random chance. That's what it is. Stop wondering. That is what it is. You either got unlucky or you suck at shuffling and truly randomizing your cards in a random way. Because if your cards aren't random, woo, there goes the whole thing. There goes this whole video. It goes out the window because your cards aren't random. So obviously probability doesn't work when your cards aren't random. But that said, you're taking a sample size of 3, okay? 3 games, using the results from 3 games and 3 opening draws, or opening hands, and then adjusting your deck accordingly? I have an idea. Use 1,000 games as a starting point, because 3 games isn't very scientific. That's like me flipping a coin 3 times and saying, 2 heads and 1 tails. Well, this coin is broken. It comes up heads 2/3 of the time, not half the time. What's going on? You're an idiot. That's what's going on. I always tell people this. Instead of playtesting and using the results from playtesting, because unless you've got 6 hours, you're not going to have a representative scientific sample size of how your deck plays, just do the damn math. Just do the math in the first place. Go to the hypergeometric calculator online, learn how to use it, which takes about 60 seconds. I have a video on it. Just type in hypergeometric into my channel search. You'll find it. And then just do the math and find out how many lands you're actually supposed to have. 24, you're probably supposed to have 22. So the fact that you got land screwed 3 games, woo, unlucky you. That's it. It was all just luck or shuffling. That does not mean start dumping in more, because then guess what's going to happen? Oh, I added 1 land. I went from 23 to 24, and now I'm getting flooded every game. What am I supposed to do? Add half a land? No, instead of using 5 games as a sample size, or 1 F&M, which is still not big enough, just do the damn math, because the math is infinite. It's as if you played an infinite number of games. So, like when I say, what's your chance of pulling exactly 2 lands when you've got 60 cards in your library and 21 lands? And so what's your chances of getting exactly 2? It's 31.3% of the time in infinite games. Not 10 games, not 100 games, not 1,000 games, infinite games. So you can't get more accurate than that. And infinite scales down to the small scale, but the smaller the scale gets, the more variance you get. So before I start talking about like sigma levels and levels of like confidence or whatever they call it, because God knows I don't even understand that, I think I'm going to end it here. So hopefully you guys got this. Hopefully you're not too shocked by just the sheer probability of getting mana screwed, because it's high at almost any level. I mean, if you literally make 30 of your 60 cards lands and you need to get 2 or more, there's still a 5.2% chance that you won't. It's going to happen, okay? You're going to start with not a right amount of lands. And I keep saying start with, don't start with it. In that case, mulligan, obviously. So if you have any questions about anything I said in this video or missed in this video, you want to add something to it, leave it down in the comment section. If you want to contradict what I said, you are literally arguing with reality, probability, and the nature of the universe, and you've basically become a feminist at this point then. I'm going to argue with reality and logic because I don't like it. Okay, that's like Anita Sarkeesian level stupid right there. You can't reach that level. It's dangerous. So if you found this video on the whole completely disappointing and distressing and depressing, go play Hearthstone and don't forget to leave a thumbs down. Otherwise, I mean, just if you're aware of it and you know, mulligan more, don't start with one, and do the math ahead of time to idealize the card draws for the mana curve and the importance of my 3-cost spells versus my 2 versus my 1. Just do that, take it into consideration, it's not that hard, and just dial in the number of lands, because you will reduce your losses immensely. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.